All right, welcome to the Gridiron Report, your Lions First All Detroit Sports podcast. Today is Tuesday, January 14th, and after a well-deserved bye week, we now know your Detroit Lions will be facing off against the Washington Commanders in their first round of the playoffs. We also have a ton of coaching updates surrounding the Lions, a few different other Detroit sports things, so let's get into it. Obviously, we have no game to review as the Lions were off on the bye week. So we're just going to jump right into the Lions preview. Again, this against the Commanders. So let's just jump right into Commanders coming to Ford Field to play the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, I would love to be the first to introduce you to Commie Hate Week. That's right, and I hope that we can all band together as red-blooded Americans in support of Commie Hate Week and to put an end to the commies for good. I think it's just, it's what we can do as Americans. And so, yeah, a couple things for me, Ty. First, Ford Field, it's going to be loud. I think there's a chance that they could break the whatever NFL decibel record is out there. I don't know if the Lions have been close to breaking it or have broken it previously, but I'm feeling really good about this being one of, if not the loudest environments in NFL playoff history or game history. And yeah, I guess just a couple things. Lions have not played the Commanders very often. In fact, in the last 10 years, the Lions have only played the Commanders 4 times. They're 3-1 in those games. I do expect it to be 4-1. We can jump into offensive and defensive thoughts in just a little bit. But just one more thing. I actually just saw this on Twitter 20 minutes ago. Didn't verify it at all. But this is the most expensive non-Super Bowl game in NFL history with average ticket prices of just under $1,000. It looked like about $990. So, again, did absolutely no research of my own on this. Saw it on Twitter. It's got to be true. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, you can rest assured because I saw the same thing on Twitter, and if we both saw it, that it absolutely has to be true. There's no way that it's false if we both saw some sort of tweet or anything about it. But I saw that $991 average ticket price. I think the actual cheapest to get in the door is just under $600, which is absolutely insane. I mean, say what you want about it. Since the Lions have gotten better, I feel like it's been an ongoing conversation. People have talked about how we're starting to get, the real diehard fans who were with Detroit, in the hard times are starting to get priced out of these games. And that's a whole conversation for a different day. But I agree with you. I think even if the price is going to be astronomical as it already looks to be, I think we're going to set records. I'm pretty sure Detroit holds it's either Detroit and the Chiefs who hold the 2 loudest games. I think we got that either last year or 2 years ago. We were right up there. It could have even been the Rams playoff game last year that we broke it. So I expect it to be right up there again. Like you said, Detroit's going to show out. But let's start out with Guess the Line. So Guess the Line real quick. Those who haven't listened to us, Kyle guesses what Vegas has set the line at, what they think Detroit Lions versus whatever opponent is going to be. So Kyle, go ahead and guess the line for the Commanders coming to Ford Field to play the Detroit Lions.
This is a tough one because obviously I think that the Lions are, I'm going to say significantly better than the Commanders, but this is a playoff game. It's a divisional game. And we know this in the NFL. It's any given Sunday, really. So I'm kind of gauging off the Bucks Commanders line from last week. Bucks were favored by 3. I think that the Lions are good. I'm going to guess 2.5 points or 3 points better than that. So I if I had to guess, I would say Lions minus 5.5. Just given that this is a playoff game, and I expect this to be decently tight.
Yeah, so you're dead on it. I have it right now at Lions minus 5.5. I have seen it get all the way. I think it opened at maybe 7. Lions minus 7. So it's obviously coming down a little bit. I think exactly like you said. I think Ford Field plays a huge part in this. I think just the fact that the Commanders are kind of new to this over the last 15 years, and we'll get into that in a second. But I think all those come into play. I think what was also really interesting about the odds and stuff is that if you've seen this on, I think I saw it on Twitter, the anytime touchdown scores, they have 6 different Lions who have better odds at scoring a touchdown than I think until the first Commander comes up, or maybe it's 4 or 5 different Lions have better odds to score a touchdown before the first Washington Commander comes up to score, an anytime touchdown. I think it's probably Scary Terry or Jade and Daniels there. But I think that just shows how Vegas thinks that this could possibly be even more wide of a game than just the -5.5, just based on the odds. I think Craig Reynolds was even on the anytime touchdown list for Detroit. I think he was at like a +400, which is it's decently high based on anytime touchdowns, but for a guy like Craig Reynolds to even be on there is pretty crazy. So I thought that was interesting as well. But yeah, Detroit -5.
Where are you seeing 5.5? I'm just curious. I'm just pulling it up on my phone. I'm seeing 9.5. So it's a pretty big discrepancy.
Interesting. So I was just looking on ESPN. 9.5. That's a huge discrepancy. Oh, I'm sorry.
On action.
So it looks like it actually it opened on ESPN open at 5.5. It actually is sitting at 10 now.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think that's too high, but yeah.
Yeah. So
in the middle, I think, is where it should
be. I think if you're saying 5.5, it opened at 5.5, I think that's probably, so that just says what people are thinking about Ford Field. And even though the Commanders, I thought they looked pretty good, and we'll get into them in a few minutes. People are heavily leaning towards the Lions more so as the days go on and we get closer and closer to Saturday. Okay, so Saturday night, like I said, we now know the Commanders are coming to town at 8 p.m. Before we even start really about breaking down the offense and defense, we agree we wanted the Commanders over the Bucs, right?
Yeah. I think that was the team. I mean, if you're just looking at playoff teams in the NFC side of the bracket, I would rather face the Commanders than, a hot Rams team. I even thought that, if the Vikings came back to town, it's tough to beat a team 3 times, let alone a divisional opponent. That would have been challenging. So I think of the teams we could have played, it's probably the Commanders, given they have a rookie quarterback, albeit a rookie quarterback that is playing extremely well. And so I'm certainly not taking this game lightly. And I know for a fact that Dan Campbell and the Lions are not taking this game lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I mean, looking at all the teams in general, who, like you said, who we could have played, don't want to play the Vikings again just because we played them so many times. The Rams looked absolutely insane. I mean, they did what we kind of thought the Eagles were going to do. They handled that game. They handled their business, properly. So I'm glad we don't have to play the Rams immediately. So I'm happy with the Commanders. I think it offers a new challenge. In a sense, the Commanders are very similar to Detroit in this fact that, like, they're coming off a really down year in which maybe they showed a little bit of heart, a little bit of hope for their fans, but they were able to turn around, get their new guy in there, Jaden Daniels, and have just kind of been this fun, exciting team. They have Cliff Kingsbury brought on the staff. They're really fun, exciting. The fans are having a great time. They're, in my opinion, very similar to the Lions, in which they maybe are just kind of taking it for granted now. I saw on Twitter there's a lot of Commanders fans that are saying this is, they're playing with house money at this time because they won their playoff game, first one I think since like 2006. I might be wrong on that, but they said that they're basically playing with house money, which in a sense, obviously it from a distance, that's loser talk. They say what you want about what we were saying last year and whatever they're saying this year. Like, I know a lot of Detroit fans felt the same way as soon as we got that first playoff win. A lot of fans, for better or for worse, were like, hey, we got our playoff win, first one in how many years since '93 or whatever. As long as we got it, we can lose now, and I'll be okay. We'll be moving to next year. So I kind of see a lot of similarities between the Commanders and Detroit fans. At the same time, I think I caution them to be careful. There was another video that came out as all the Commanders fans, who I'm sure were drunk from the game and amped up from the win, and they were all chanting they want Detroit. And I don't know, like I've liked the Commanders. I think they're a pretty fun story to watch this season. I don't really know of anyone that is like absolutely hates the Commanders, but just seeing that fired me up, and I'm like, you don't want Detroit. Like let's not go around chanting you want Detroit when you really don't. Like and I know we haven't been at the top of the the standings for very long. It's really been like 2 years we've been up here, so we can't really act all that high and mighty. But like, you don't want Detroit. Let's not go chanting around you want Detroit. I really want to take it to them after seeing that. I don't know what it was about that video.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, buddy, Commanders, you have Detroit. You don't have to chant that. You certainly have us. And yeah, I would caution them going up against, as we know, one of the league's best offenses, averaging 410 yards per game, 70 touchdowns on the season. So yeah, Commanders, if you want that, well, you got it on Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. I think if we want to jump into first the offensive thoughts for the Lions, and just looking at this Commanders team, they rank 13th in the league in terms of yards, but their scoring defense is just 18th. They have a very good passing defense. It's third in the NFL, and their rushing defense leaves a little bit to be desired. 29th ranked rush defense, giving up 137 yards per game. So you pair that, a weak rushing defense, with the likes of David Montgomery. He should be back. He should be healthy. I do expect Gibbs to get more carries. I think that they might have, Monty on maybe a bit of a snap count, although let's be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have him on any kind of snap count. I expect a little bit of a snap count, Gibbs to get maybe the majority of carries. But at any rate, having both backs healthy and, being able to utilize both of them against this bad Commies rush defense, I just think that the Lions are going to be able to move the ball at will and really score. And let's be honest, jam the running offense down the Commanders' throats. Washington gives up a lot of points, and I expect the Lions to establish the run, and that's going to open up play action. We know what this team can do on play action.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the team, like you said, their defense are, I think they're 29th or 30th PFF overall defense, 18th in points, allowing 391 on the season. But I mean, they are coming off a good performance against the Bucs. I thought, like we said, their run defense I thought was better than, you just went through the numbers. I thought their run defense was a little bit better against the Bucs than maybe their numbers say. But the Bucs rushing offense isn't anywhere near what Detroit's is. I know you mentioned Monty coming back. I think Dan was asked about it today. He said he's going to wait and see to make sure Monty can log a full practice tomorrow before he officially declares him in or out. But obviously, like you said, he is trending on starting. I agree with you. I think we would normally say and expect him to be on a snap count, but we kind of thought the same thing about Alex Anzalone against the Vikings, that his first game back, he was going to be on a snap count. And he was in, like we said during last week's episode, he was in there longer than we wanted. When the game was pretty much out of reach, he was still in the game. So I don't really foresee a snap count. If he's good to go, I think he's good to go. I think it's going to get in there. And it also helps that we already have the 1-2 punch. They're already splitting, carries between Montgomery and Gibbs. So it's not like he's jumping in and doing 100% of the snaps, like Anzalone kind of was. He's already splitting that. So, I think having him back is going to be important. The Commanders' defense is led by 34-year-old Bobby Wagner. There's a few plays. I mean, Bobby Wagner is still Bobby Wagner. He's still one of the best linebackers in the entire NFL. He is 34, as I just said. I saw some plays against the Buccaneers in which he was kind of sluggish a little bit. His age was showing a little bit, but he still has 132 total tackles, which is second. He's second among linebackers PFF wise. So you got to kind of avoid him and understand that he's so cerebral. He's so good at breaking down offenses, from a defensive standpoint and being that quarterback of the defense. And we know Bobby Wagner. We know what he can do. So you kind of avoid him. Outside of him, you got 8 sacks from their other linebacker, Frankie Louvu, and then 10 for linebacker Dante Fowler. So really all their defensive productivity is coming from their linebacker core. And when it wasn't, it was, coming from guys like Deron Payne up on the line, who went down with an injury last week. I was just, as we were talking, trying to get an update on his injury. I'm not finding anything, whether he's going to be good to go for Saturday or not. But regardless, he's definitely not going to be 100%. Seeing some just different things about quote unquote gruesome injuries. I didn't think it looked that bad, but so I don't think Deron Payne is going to be able to go. So that really is just the linebacker core that we need to worry about as an offensive side. They only have 7 picks on the year, which is the bottom third in the NFL, with Mikey Sanistril leading the way with 2 of them. Mike Evans, we talked. Everyone in the NFL was talking about the Mike Evans versus Marshawn Lattimore matchup, and I don't know about you. I think Mike Evans got the best of that matchup. I think he didn't go crazy like Mike Evans does, but I think he really had the best of Marshawn Lattimore. And so I'm really hoping we can kind of take advantage of that as well.
For sure. Yeah. Yep. You mentioned the linebacking core. Completely agree. Commies have a great linebacking core. We have seen, a lot of really good success. The Lions, offensive line, they're really tremendous at getting into that second line of the defense, blocking those linebackers, and even getting into the third line, and blocking cornerbacks and safeties. So I think that, linebackers, I don't think they're going to be the X factor for the Commies. I really do think that we'll be able to establish that run regardless. And I think just probably one more thing, just looking at the Lions offense, you got to capitalize on the red zone. Of course, that goes without saying. In the regular season, the Lions were awesome at red zone efficiency, red zone offense, but it really, really changes in the playoffs when it's a little bit easier to pucker up and make mistakes in the red zone. I mean, we see the likes of a Sam Darnold just really making mistakes in the red zone. It could happen to anyone. I'm not saying it's going to happen to Jared Goff, but they definitely have to capitalize in the red zone. The Commanders have a bottom third red zone defense. They rank just 22nd. I really think that the Lions are going to do what they do in the red zone. They're going to capitalize. They're going to finish drives, and they're going to score touchdowns. And we see it. Over under. We talked about the spread. Over under is like 55.5. So I mean, there's going to be points scored in this game. That's an absolute given. And I like the over in that game on Saturday night. But yeah, you got to finish drives. It's integral.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up the over-under because that was literally going to be my next point, that 55.5 over-under. I'm also taking that over. I think Detroit on offense compared to the Washington defense, I think we're going to have our way in a certain sense from the offensive side. So let's transition over to the defensive side because I also think that's going to be it's really going to be whichever defense can kind of make the stands. Because that Commanders offense, thanks to Jaden Daniels, is kind of hitting on all cylinders right now. We just saw them basically take the Buccaneers defense completely out of it. I think Jaden Daniels, which definitely doesn't play well to how Detroit runs their defense. If you think back to just the game against the Vikings and Sam Darnold, one way we were able to beat him, and because we are so injured on the defensive side, we don't naturally get a lot of pressure from the defensive line. So what Aaron Glenn likes to do, he brings a lot of pressure. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he is at the top of the league in amount of pressures and blitzing that he sends. And Sam Darnold kind of folded like the pumpkin he is when we played the Vikings, and that helped us, it was to our advantage. On the other hand, the Commanders, Jaden Daniels is fantastic against the blitz. I don't know, he is just so calm and cool and collective when they blitz against him. He can absolutely tear you apart when you blitz. We kind of saw the same thing when when we played the Bills and we were blitzing Josh Allen. It got to a point where I was saying, like, let's just stop setting pressure. Like, I get he's going to have all the time in the world back there because we don't naturally have a lot of pressure up front with our injuries, with the lean being out, with Hutch being out, and so on. But like every time we sent pressure, manufactured pressure, it was Josh Allen either scrambling and finding a guy 30 yards downfield that managed to break free, or Josh Allen scrambling and getting the first down himself. It was to a point where I was like, just stop sending guys. Let's just let our secondary go and just try and get natural pressure. So I'm a little bit worried that Jaden Daniels does that as well. He's third best QBR against the blitz. And I've seen it. I mean, we've seen it firsthand with him. He's able to find guys like Terry McLaurin down the field for 30 yards, after scrambling and keeping the play alive a little bit. It has me a little bit worried, to be honest.
I'm certainly worried as well. I mean, Jaden Daniels, he's electric. He's, in my opinion, the clear offensive rookie of the year. And he's really elevated this Commanders offense, tremendously from where they were even a year ago. And, he's especially nasty in the run game. So I know we've talked about the Lions and scrambling quarterbacks in the past. I think, almost what differentiates Daniels is he's not just a scrambler. They do a ton of design runs for Jaden Daniels. And we know, I mean, it's football 101, but QB design runs, when they are ran properly, they can be deadly. You essentially, you have an extra blocker because, your ball carrier is now the quarterback, the guy who is normally, handing that ball off and not doing anything on a run play. Well, he is now the running back. So yeah. And they pair that with the opportunity for RPOs as well. So run pass options, which, the Commanders do all the time. And it's a really tough ask from a defense to defend that when, you have multiple options and multiple looks, you can do it out of emotion. So I really do think that Aaron Glenn's number one priority is stopping this Commanders run game, RPO game, but really more than anything else, it's stopping Jaden Daniels because, he accounts for, I think, a third of the Commanders' total rushing yards. He averages, over 50 yards per game on the ground. So I don't know how you do it because, sending pressure, if it doesn't get home, Jaden Daniels is out and scrambling.
Right.
And he could be running for a while. I don't know if it's, a mixture of sending pressures, potentially a spy, but you can't let him run for 50, 60, 70 yards on you and get these chunk plays that extend drives. So, yeah, it's going to be a very tall task for Aaron Glenn in this defense.
Yeah, in my professional opinion, being all the experience I had playing Madden, in NCAA 25, what I think I will expect Aaron Glenn to do is probably put a spy on him, on Jaden Daniels, like you said, because he's just so lethal. I think you're going to trust your big boys up front, DJ Reader, Levi Allen-Zawerki, the big boys up in the middle, to not allow any sort of real run game to get going from the running backs, not including Jaden Daniels, but from Brian Robinson, from Austin Eckler, and even, I guess, in Jaden Daniels, if they're going to be running their design runs up the gut, some draws and stuff from Jaden Daniels. I think you kind of trust them. You put a spy in the linebacker core. And then I think the other thing that you can do from the secondary is you have to, I think, just mix things up as much as possible. And we broke it down a little bit last week, and I think Brian Baldinger broke it down on Twitter when the Lions played the Vikings.
Love Baldy. Shout out Baldy.
He's fantastic. He broke down a bunch of different defensive plays and step by step, specifically when we were, how many times were the Lions backed up against their own end zone and they were able to stop, Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison from getting in the end zone. He broke it down that there were so many different defensive plays and defensive schemes that AG put together, in which there was robbers, there was handoffs, there was sometimes man, sometimes zone. When you think we're going to be playing man, or we're playing zone, or we're playing a mixture, or playing a hybrid, I think that's going to probably be the way to beat Jaden Daniels, in that, like, you just got to make sure that he doesn't know. He's having a hard time read the defense, and then naturally, you don't have to try and manufacture that pressure. If he's still trying to comprehend and figure out what the defense is, and get a little bit of natural pressure while he's doing that, I think that's probably going to be the best way to stop him. But at the same time, we need our secondary to stay on their guys and not let Terry McLaurin get open. On the season, Terry McLaurin, 82 catches, 1,096 receiving yards, 13 touchdowns, a long of 86 yards, which I believe was at the very end of the play, or very end of the game, in which they ended up winning that game, I believe. He's a deep threat. You cannot let him get open. If the defense up front does their job and contains Jaden Daniels, as much as they can, you can't let them break, the coverage break down on the back end. If you look outside of McLaurin, though, the second leading receiver is Zach Ertz with 650 receiving yards. So it's like you shut down Terry at all costs. I think you let Zach Ertz, and tight ends have a tendency to hurt this Lions defense, specifically the linebackers. Obviously, last week or 2 weeks ago with Hawkinson, he wasn't able to get anything going. But normally, tight ends kind of hurt us. So I think you just let Zach Ertz and get those easy under throws, and you don't allow anything over top to Terry McLaurin, and you don't let Jaden Daniels kind of break containment, and you kind of just go from there. I think you pray and give him a whole bunch of different schemes that he's not aware of.
Yeah, I like it. Nothing over the top, nothing easy. Because we know how good Terry McLaurin is. I think we've both been saying his praises for years, and that's when he's had horrendous quarterbacks throwing him the ball. No offense to the Taylor Heineke's of the world. But yeah, I think one more thing for me, just the key for Aaron Glenn and this Lions defense. First and foremost, we talked about it, but you got to stop the run. As good as Jaden Daniels is, he's very much still growing and developing as a passer. He's a rookie, obviously. That doesn't even have to be said, but I'm saying it anyways. If you stop that run game and you can contain Daniels in any way to make him one-dimensional, I think he's going to struggle. And I think some of that struggle might even come from just the fact that, you're uncomfortable for, a road game. Of course, he just played in a road game. And again, no offense to the Bucs fans, but Ford Field is just a completely different. It's not Ford Field, completely different dynamic, and it's going to be loud. And I think that if you make Daniels uncomfortable, make it harder for him to communicate and audible, I think it's gonna make him a bit less dynamic, and that it might be the difference in the game.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. The last thing that I'll say, and I was gonna put this in with the offense, but one more thing that I think we should touch on, just because it very well could come down to the game of the Dans. You have Dan Quinn and Dan Campbell. Both of them love to go on fourth downs. They are, I think they're like number one and number two on going for it and fourth downs. I think the Commanders actually have a higher rate of going for it and succeeding than the Lions. I might be wrong on that, but either way, both these teams, when it's third down, if it's third and long, both of these teams are not trying to pick up all that, yardage to get the first down. Both of these teams are going to be putting themselves into situations to get a fourth and short kind of way. So it's going to be really interesting to see, Detroit for so many weeks, and the last few years really have put teams in uncomfortable positions because, we're going for it on fourth downs. They suddenly have an extra down that they have to account for. Then on offense, they're thinking like, should we go for it on fourth down? Do we need to start changing? That's not going to be really a factor in this because the Commanders also go for it on fourth down. So it'll be really interesting to see, a game of the dance. I mean, they're both very aggressive, so it'll be interesting. The other thing I will say is Washington field goals. I think we also maybe have a little bit of an edge when it comes to field goal kicking. Washington field goals this year, 81%. Detroit field goals this year with Jake Bates, 89.7%. From 50-plus yardage, Washington field goals, 25%. Detroit with Jake Bates, 85%. So if we're not going to be going for it on fourth down, maybe it comes down to a little bit of kicking here and there. It seems like Detroit has the edge with our man Jake Bates.
Love it. Yeah, I love that. You take an edge anywhere you can in the NFL playoffs. Pause. So yeah, I guess just before we wrap this up, do you have a scoring prediction, Tyler, for Saturday night's game?
Wow. Okay, putting me on the spot here. I like this. Okay, so we said the over under was what, 55.5. I think
it's about 55. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
55.5.
I'm gonna say it's gonna be 35-17 Detroit.
Wow.
And
okay.
I think it's going to be closer than the score feels. I think looking back to last week, even with I keep saying last week, or last game against the Vikings, like that was 31-9. I think the final score of that game was. If you look back at the game when you were watching it, it didn't feel like 31-9. It was kind of the last like 8 or so minutes that Detroit busted it open. For I'd say 3/4 of that game, it was close and it really could have gone either way. I think it'll be more similar to that, in which it really kind of. It's touch and go for a little bit. Who's going to make the first mistake, which defense is going to get the stop. But then I think towards the end, that the Lions offense is just going to completely wear down the Commanders defense. And I think it's going to be further. The Lions cover and we move on.
I like it. So a guy who was on record not 10 minutes ago saying he likes the over. He's going with the under in this prediction.
No one ever said I was good at math.
I'm with you. I think, the Lions are going to win this game. I think it's going to be closer. I'm going to go with Lions 34, Commanders 24. And I do like, you mentioned Jake Bates. I think that a long Jake Bates field goal is going to be, the difference to put the Lions up 2 scores, probably sometime in the fourth quarter, and it's just going to be too much, and the Lions defense is going to hold. So that's my prediction, 34-24, and the Lions march on to the NFC Championship game.
I like that. If we're doing predictions off predictions, I predict your prediction is much closer than mine. I like that, 34-24. Okay. So, before we get into just a few miscellaneous items, let's get into our predictive grid of the week. So, just real quick, again, if you are a new listener, each week while we're going through our review of the previous week's games, Kyle and I will both give out a grit of the week, somebody that stood out, whether it's overall performance, a player or two, someone that deserves some praise, getting the grit of the week. And then when we're doing our preview later on the show, we'll do our predictive grit of the week to kind of see who we think will have the best game, depending on matchup, who we're playing, stuff like that. So who do you have for predictive grit of the week against the Washington Commanders?
Yeah, I got a guy who I think, assuming he's good to go, he's going to be hungry. The big fella has not played in 3 or 4 weeks now. He's going to be hungry, and he's going to get fed, especially at the goal line, and it's going to be David Montgomery. He's going to be my grit of the week. I expect him to score on Saturday night. Again, assuming he's good to go and he's playing. Yeah,
okay, I like that. And like we said, it sounds like he's had full practices. Dan Campbell just wants to see one more full practice to actually mark him in. It sounds like he's going to be good to go. So I love that. It's going to be so great to see him back in there. And, shout out Gibbs, who was able to hold it down while he was out. But just having that, that guy you can swap in and out and just get a quick breather. And shout out Craig Reynolds as well. He's done a fantastic job, playing in Monty's absence. But so I have... in our show notes, my original predictive grit of the week was going to be Gibbs. I think Gibbs against this poor rushing defense was going to have a day. But in talking about this, and I still think he will, in talking through this and talking about who's going to play well and what we need to do, I'm actually going to switch it. Which, if you recall, you've been listening for a while, I did this a few weeks ago, and I should have stuck with my original. I said that Sam Laporta was going to have a great game, and then I switched off him. He ended up having 2 touchdowns. So this almost always never works out for me. I'm going to switch this from Gibbs to Alex Anzalone. I think Anzalone is going to be flying all over the place. I think he's going to be making tackles on Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to be running up and down the line of scrimmage, going sideline to sideline, making tackle after tackle. I think Anzalone is going to have a fantastic day. I think he's going to have upwards of, I think he's going to have upwards of 12 to 14 tackles. I think he's going to be all over the place.
Love it. I'm with you on that. I mean, he's a beast. He had an amazing game last week in his return from his broken arm. Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Anzalone.
Okay, so that is it for our preview. Again, the Washington Commanders coming to Ford Field Saturday night, 8 p.m. Tickets are very expensive. You can't go. Make sure you're watching and yelling at your TV because they might be able to hear you through the TV. Just a few miscellaneous items kind of related to the game. We already touched on Monty. Specifically, this is some injury stuff. We already touched on Montgomery, him being expected to be back. I guess all these guys are all expected. There's been nothing, I don't think, confirmed yet, but Montgomery expected to be back as long as he can log a full practice tomorrow. You have Terrion Arnold also expected to be back. He went down with an ankle injury that seemed pretty bad at the time during that Vikings game. I think it was a little bit of a hyperextension, a little friendly fire. I think it actually was one of our own defenders running through his foot and hyperextending that ankle. He was carted off, looked pretty bad at the time, but it sounds like even after the game, he was in a boot. But they asked him about it, and he's like, yeah, no doubt, I'm playing, I'm playing after the bye. Sounds like he is on track to do that, so we should be getting Terrion Arnold back, which, as we kind of saw over the last few weeks when we didn't have Terrion Arnold, it's more important than we maybe thought to start the season. So great to hear from him. You have Kevin Zeitler, who, similar to Anzalone, when we were talking about when the game was out of reach, Kevin Zeitler on the offensive line was still in the game. Myself, I know I was extremely frustrated. I'm sure a few others were, that we still had our starters in there. But as the game was coming to an end, Kevin Zeitler kind of came up lame a little bit. He was dealing with, I guess he pulled his hamstring a little bit, basically in garbage time, which was frustrating. But after the game, he was said to be okay. It wasn't expected to be that bad with the bye. The expectation was that he was going to be good to go. Everything I'm seeing now is that he is still on track to play. So you can add him to the list of guys that are expected to come back and play on Saturday night against the Commanders. And then the final guy is Ennis Rakestraw. Ennis has been, obviously he was our second round draft pick, the cornerback this past draft. Brought in, kind of was expected to be the 1-2 new guys with Terrion Arnold. Really struggled against, with his injuries this entire year, whether he's coming off of a hamstring injury and then expected to come back from IR. He's kind of randomly put back on IR for one reason or another. I believe they did open his return window from the IR this week, so I don't think we're going to see him on Saturday night, but it is something to note that his window is being opened. If it was, a veteran who has been in the league for many years, I would expect, the window's going to be open. He can come in and hit the ground running. Being that as a rookie, especially a cornerback rookie, corners are notorious for having a hard time adjusting from college play to the NFL. I don't expect to see very much of him, but just knowing that, we have that depth. If something were to happen to anyone else, he can step in if need be, is something good to know.
Yeah, that's huge. Even if it's just to give a breather to Terrion Arnold. Of course, we know we are, without a couple cornerbacks. And so, in any capacity, if he's ready to go, if he can take some snaps, that's gigantic.
Yep. Okay, so let's wrap up Lions talk with just a little bit of coaching talk here, a little coaching updates. It's been kind of the hot news over this past week because the Lions had the bye week and didn't have a game to play. All the news outlets were just posting all the coaches and where they're all interviewing and stuff. It's been no secret. We've had two of the best coordinators in the NFL for going on 2 years now in Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. Everyone kind of expected last year to be their last year with Detroit. Both of them came back, and I think Aaron Glenn maybe was due back. I think he was benefited from having a good year. Ben Johnson could have taken a coaching job last year, but both ended up coming back. Said they had some unfinished business here in Detroit. Now that they've gone through such a successful year, they're both hot commodities out there on the coaching cycle there. So you had Aaron Glenn interviewed with the Saints on Friday, the Jets on Thursday. He's planning on meeting with the Bears and the Jaguars. I think the Patriots requested to meet with him last week. He turned them down. It's kind of wishy-washy and a little bit gray on whether they actually wanted to interview him. Could have been related to the Rooney Rule, which if you're not aware of the Rooney Rule, it states that you need to interview, I think it's one or two coaches of a minority in order to fill kind of a quota. So he kind of turned that one down. They kind of just used that to fulfill the Rooney Rule, and then went and hired Mike Vrabel. So AG really heavily being tied to the Saints. I think actually as we're recording this, I just saw something that the Saints are expected to make a strong push for Lions DC, Aaron Glenn. He obviously played for the Saints back in the day, so he is expected to have strong ties there. Outside of Aaron Glenn, you had Ben Johnson, who met with the Raiders, the Bears, the Jaguars, and the Patriots all on Friday. Some of them, I think actually all of them might have been just virtual, not actually in person, but he's obviously having the strongest pulls towards the Raiders. The Raiders, they are partially owned by Tom Brady, so I'm reading and hearing that Tom Brady is making a heavy push for Ben Johnson. You have the Bears, who really want Ben Johnson to kind of mold Caleb Williams and take that offense, which I think would be great for the Bears. So Ben Johnson getting a ton of love from actually, I think, what are the best kind of options and openings, for head coaching, at least an offensive head coach, again, with the at least with the Bears, the Jags, and the Patriots. The Raiders, maybe not so much, but at least they have a high draft pick, and they can draft, whoever Ben Johnson wants.
For sure, yeah. Just going back to Aaron Glenn real quick, I think that him to the Saints makes a tremendous amount of sense. Of course, he played for them. And actually, before he became Dan Campbell's defensive coordinator, he was actually the defensive backs coach for the Saints from, I think, like 16 to 2020. So I could see that, the Saints, I think just as a franchise, as an organization, they pride themselves on defense. They've had some tremendous defenses in the past. So, hiring a defensive head coach makes a lot of sense. And then, yeah, Ben Johnson, I think that he could succeed in a lot of different NFL situations. We haven't talked about the Cowboys yet. That's kind of news that's hot off the press yesterday, that they're moving on from Mike McCarthy. So that's another potential landing spot for Ben Johnson. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But I think it's a when, not an if for me for both these guys, because they've proven that they can both be NFL head coaches.
Yeah, I think they definitely have proven that, and they definitely could, and I wish them the best. I think Aaron Glenn is definitely a foregone conclusion. Like you said, it just makes too much sense. Aaron Glenn and the Saints, like, there's too much connections there. I think he would thrive there. I think that makes too much sense. I think there is, and Ben Johnson came out and said this week, there is a small chance that he stays with Detroit if the right one doesn't open up. Now, I think, like I said, the ones that he has been connected to make sense as well. They are probably the best open opportunities. You have Trevor Lawrence, you're looking at teams with good quarterbacks and, young guys, and you have Trevor Lawrence with the Jaguars. You have Drake May with the Patriots. You have Caleb Williams with the Bears. So, I think the opportunities are there, but there is, that off chance that Ben Johnson likes to, wants to stay with Detroit and like Dan Campbell. And depending on how this season ends up playing out, there could be unfinished business, or there could be, we hit all of our goals this year. Let's try and repeat, or whatever, it may be. So yeah, I think they both are well deserving of these opportunities. The other thing, it kind of goes along with these. You think about losing these guys, and we've like I said, going back to last year, we kind of expected that these guys are going to be interviewing, and I think a lot of people were kind of surprised that they both were able to come back for this year. But we don't kind of talk about who they're going to be taking with them. There's the chance that they just kind of go and they bring in their own guys, not part of our franchise and not part of our organization. They bring in their own guys, or they keep whoever is there wherever they go. But there is also the chance that they go somewhere and they take a guy and elevate him to an OC or DC position, or a higher position that they're at here in Detroit. That can leave us even more crippled, not just taking our OC or DC, but taking, the guy that maybe we think is in waiting that could take over for them. They're taking them with them. I'm talking primarily about Hank Fraley. I always do that. Switch those two letters up. Hank Fraley, who is the offensive line coach, fantastic offensive line coach. Obviously, Detroit is known for the last few years for their offensive line guys, Decker, Sewell, Ragnow. Fraley has been fantastic on the offensive line. There's a chance that wherever Ben Johnson goes, he takes Fraley with him, and he gives him the OC position. If it's not offered here, there's a chance he could go. I know Hank Fraley also interviewed himself for the Seattle OC position. So even if he doesn't follow Ben Johnson or any of these other guys, they also could leave. So it's really interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how our season plays out, if that affects, where these guys end up, or if they end up anywhere outside Detroit, who they take with them, who we use in our organization to replace them. I think as of right now, the guys that are in waiting, everything I've heard and read, you have, Calvin Shepard, who is the linebackers coach, I believe, for the Lions right now. He has kind of been the man in waiting for when Aaron Glenn leaves. It's obviously been talked about all season. Aaron Glenn has kind of really been training him as a DC to take over for whenever he leaves. So he is, I think, the guy expected to take over. And then on the other side, you have a guy like Tanner Agstrand, who is the offensive passing coordinator for the Lions. It's same as Shepard. He's been the one that's kind of been heavily involved in a lot of the offensive decision making and such. Seems obviously Detroit has a great passing game. Jared Goff is playing unlike he's ever has before. Amon-Ra is fantastic. J-Mo Waymo is fantastic. So Tanner, I think he's like 34, another young guy, expected to take over as well. So you kind of have those two guys in waiting. So it'd be really interesting to see if those two guys go out and get their own, jobs outside of Detroit, if they follow AG or Ben Johnson, wherever they go, if they go anywhere. It'll be really interesting to see what Detroit ends up having to fill over the next few months.
For sure. We're going to have to wait and see. Just one thing that I will add to that. The Lions, it's no secret, they're a very well-ran organization. And, Brad Holmes, we know what he can do. I can almost guarantee you that Brad Holmes and the Detroit Lions have a business continuity plan for both Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson leaving. And I think that if Ben Johnson or if Aaron Glenn, if they have said like, hey, I want to take Shepard or I want to take Tanner Engstrand, the Lions are taking this into account. And I think probably more importantly, the Lions are probably telling these guys like, hey, we need them. And so, yeah, I think there's going to be a plan in place. And I think that whatever happens, if those guys leave or stay, and if they, they take the passing coordinator, if they take, Shepard on the defensive side, I don't think it's going to be, just completely blind to Brad Holmes. They're going to have a plan in place, and they're going to know what's going to happen. So it's not going to be sudden or anything like that. I would have to imagine they are planning extensively for losing both those guys, and potentially any guys that that they want to bring with them to their respective new organizations. So just want to say I have the utmost respect for Brad Holmes, and the utmost confidence.
Yeah, I think just like the way that this, it's every single person, every single player, every single staff member, pretty much all the fans. I think the way this Lions team and success has been put together, everyone kind of came up together. I think there really is a true, level playing field, that everyone is friends, we're all working together. I think there truly is everyone on the same team. And so I don't foresee any sort of bad blood or anything like that. So I agree completely. If someone is going to be leaving and stuff, I think they would 100% like let them know like, hey, I'm planning on, bringing this guy with me wherever it is. This is who I think would be best to replace myself, and this guy I'm trying to take. There's going to be a ton of back and forth and leaving nobody out to dry. I think that's super important. So that's a great point. Yeah. So that wraps up our Lions talk. Hopefully we're coming on next week, reviewing a great game and talking about our next week. But outside of Detroit Lions, all the other Detroit sports teams are also playing absolutely fantastic. I want to just take a moment and before we get into these other teams, just like enjoy this. What do we say today, Kyle? All Detroit sports teams, including the Michigan Wolverines and Michigan State Spartans, are 32-1 since the start of 2025, which is absolutely insane. I was, on Twitter making jokes. It was like we were like 6-0 to start the new year, and I was counting it down like 6-0, and then we won the next day, and I was like 7-0, and here we are now 32-1, 2 weeks into the new year, and the only loss has come, I think it was the Pistons loss. Everywhere around Detroit is actually fantastic. Let's truly enjoy this time as Detroit is starting to make this resurgence sports wise.
Yeah, drink it in. This is special. This is something that, I mean, not only does that not a run like this, it doesn't happen often to franchises, to cities, I should say, sports cities. It certainly doesn't happen to Detroit, and maybe at least not in the last couple decades. So yeah, absolutely drink it in. This is, what a time to be alive.
Yeah, so with the Pistons, Pistons obviously, I think they're 2 games above 500 now. They are on an absolute tear. There's only 2 other teams that have played better than them, and since 2025 has started. They are playing fantastic basketball. Cade Cunningham is now the betting leader to win Most Improved Player. He is absolutely an all-star. We said it last week, but we'll say it again this week. If you haven't gone out and voted for Cade Cunningham to be on the all-star team, please go out and do so. Trajan Langdon is the favorite. It's still a little bit early, but Trajan Langdon is the favorite for NBA Executive of the Year based on all the guys he's put together around Cade Cunningham and this team, even after losing Jaden Ivey to that fibula fracture a few weeks ago. They have not missed a beat, and really making it a really great discussion on like whether we still will be sellers at the deadline, come February in a few weeks, or whether we'll be buyers or stand pat. And we'll get more into a lot of those options and who I think we should tackle or target as February comes along. But it's also fun to note Pistons are playing the Suns. The Phoenix Suns are coming to Detroit. The game originally was at 5 p.m. on Saturday. Because of the Lions game. That game was moved up to 4 p.m. So you better believe Devin Booker was asked about this. He will be there. He thought it was on Sunday, so he was just planning on staying an extra day and going to the game. He found out that it was on Saturday. So he will be at the Detroit Lions game. He has a fun little bet going on with Kevin Durant. Booker is a guy that we've kind of, not just we, a lot of people on Twitter have tied to Detroit for years and years and years based on him being from here and him absolutely loving Detroit and the Pistons. Again, we'll get into more on like whether that's feasible for Detroit to target or not, but it's just fun to note. You better believe Devin Booker, after playing the Pistons at 4 p.m., will be across the street at Ford Field at 8 p.m. watching the Lions.
Hell yeah. And then not too long that we're going to bring him home for good. Yeah, and you mentioned Cade Cunningham. Can we talk about Cade Cunningham? I feel like I'm Charlie Kelly right now. Can we talk about the mail? Can we please talk about All-Star Cade Cunningham? Because this is my opinion, that Cade has, all but solidified himself as an all-star in this league, in the NBA. So my question now is, does he have a chance to start in the all-star game? And I know these are questions, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, right? That doesn't mean shit. Well, it still means some shit to me, right? So I was just, looking at, guards in the Eastern Conference that, could quote-unquote be ahead of Cade to start in the all-star game. And developed a list, an awesome list. LaMelo Ball, Darius Garland, Jalen Brunson, Trae Young, Damian Lillard, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, and then, of course, Cade Cunningham. And so, I think how this works is, it's basically front court and back court. So you're not splitting up point guards from shooting guards. It's just guards at the end of the day. And I'm looking at the numbers. Cade averages 24.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and 9.5 assists per game. And by the way, 9.5 assists is just insane. And I think those numbers are only going up as Cade's been playing so well. But his numbers, leaps and bounds better than Darius Garland, Jalen Brunson, Dame Lillard, Maxey, and Donovan Mitchell. I mean, just across the board, they are better. He's outscoring a lot of these guys. And really where his numbers are better, he averages more rebounds than any other guard that I've mentioned, and his assists at 9.5 per game. Trae Young at 12 assists per game. Shout out Trae Young. That's an absurd stat line. Cade at 9.5 is the second highest of any player that I've mentioned. So I think that it is a realistic possibility that we see Cade Cunningham and LaMelo Ball start as the guards for the Eastern Conference in the All-Star game. Just a quick shout out to LaMelo. This isn't granted in 25 games because I think he was hurt. Nearly 30 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, and 7.5 assists. So I think that LaMelo, in my opinion, assuming that he's not getting penalized for only playing 25 games, I think he's a clear starter. And I think Cade is right alongside him. So would love to hear your thoughts there. Yeah. If it even matters.
No, it definitely does. It doesn't. You're right. It is, at the end of the day, somewhat of a popularity contest. And so we can shout until we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, we need everyone to get out there and vote. But for a while, it was just like, is Cade an all-star? Like, we think he is. Everyone outside of Detroit, we need you guys to see it too. Now it truly is Cade a starter? Like, he's not just going to be it maybe or maybe not in the all-star game. It's maybe not be a starter in the all-star game. He's been so fantastic the last 2 months. I mean, just watching him, the game is slowing down so much. There's no other team, no other defense that's able to speed him up. He is absolutely fantastic. He's playing his game. He's playing at really similar to like Luka Doncic level, in which he's an oversized guard and the game's going real slow for him. It didn't matter. They played the Knicks last night. It didn't matter who they put on him, whether it was Josh Hart, it was Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges. It didn't matter who they put on him. He was able to slow it down and basically maneuver in any which way he wanted and use his 6'6" frame to get what he wanted. He had 4 fouls in the second quarter last night against the Knicks, and he still finished the game, never fouled out in a game that we needed him to play the entire one. Finished, I think, with 36 points. He was absolutely fantastic. He went on a run in the third quarter that was insane. I think he had like 9 or 12 points in a row or something. I mean, Cade Cunningham, I cannot say enough about that. No, enough about the man. And then outside of him, I mean, and if you can, I could talk for hours and hours about the Pistons. And as the Lions season starts to wrap up, we will shift into some of these other teams and other sports and break them down even further. But even outside of Cade, I think his supporting cast has been fantastic. Malik Beasley is an absolute dog. I love Malik so much. I love the development that we're seeing from Asar Thompson and Ron Holland. Isaiah Stewart is an absolute beast on the defensive end, blocking shots. He had 2 block shots last night. Jalen Duren is even starting to pick it up on the defensive end, which is super important. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, just absolutely fantastic. This team is far and away exceeding expectations. We're midway through the season almost, and they're about to. I think the over/under on the wins for the season was 25. I think it was maybe 25. And I think we're at 19 now. So it's like, I mean, we're slated to triple what we were expected to get on the year. So absolutely fantastic from the Pistons. Just keeping things moving along. Other Detroit sports, Tigers, no big news. Still haven't signed Bregman. Chris Ilitch, I know you're an avid listener. You reach out all the time to talk on the podcast. We obviously have no time, so we can't allow you to. But just go out and sign Bregman. Get it done. Let's add Bregman to this lineup. We need him. He wants to be here. Hinch wants him. Get it done.
Yeah, Chris Ilitch. I mean, what are we doing? Little Caesars, Red Wings. You have money, dude. Sign the guy. Like, just pay him. I mean, it's got to be. I'm not going to say it's going to be a team friendly deal. He's probably going to garner, quite a bit of cash, but I mean, just sign the man, meet in the middle ground, and please, let's get it done. I mean, for once, do the right thing, Chris.
Yeah, Mike would have. His dad, Mike Ilitch, would have done it. So let's do it, Chris. Get it done. Get Bragg signed. I want to be coming on here next week talking about a Lions win and signing of Alex Bregman. Nothing else. Tigers though. Red Wings. Red Wings may never lose again. This is insane. I know it's a thing in the NHL. The coaching firing, the firing of a coach bump. It's an actual thing. You fire a coach mid-season. Usually you find a bump, and for whatever reason, the Red Wings may never lose for the rest of the entire season.
It's feasible. I could see it. They could do the impossible. I mean, they beat up on a Seattle Kraken team, a pretty good Seattle Kraken team. I mean, they went up 4-0 in about 9 minutes of ice time, 10 minutes of game time. Like, it was, I mean, I literally looked up and they were winning by 2 goals, and it must have been in a matter of seconds, seemingly. So, I mean, they're awesome. Lucas Raymond, he continues to excel and prove that he is one of, if not the best young players in this league. He's still only 23, maybe just turned 24 years old. Extremely young, especially for NHL terms. That's a very, very young age. He's on pace for 90 points on the season. And just quick stat, since December 29th, the NHL points leaders. Number 1 is Patty Kane, 13 points. Number 2 in the NHL since the 29th, Lucas Raymond, 12 points. 4th is Alex DeBrincat with 11 points. And then 6th, D-Boss, Dylan Larkin with 10 points. So, I mean, this team, quite literally the hottest team in the NHL, they're buzzing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was what frustrated so many fans for the first half of the season is, like, we know Yzerman didn't go out and add technically like the guys everyone wanted to. He didn't really make that many roster improvements. And if anything, he made some strange acquirings with the Tarasenko and stuff like that. But what really frustrated everyone was like the energy and the effort wasn't there under Lalonde for the first half of the season. And now that Lalonde is gone, we're seeing these guys play with energy. They're having fun again. They're playing hard. The young guys are getting involved. Marco Kasper had a second straight multi-point game. For the Ring. You got all these young guys that are also coming up with. You talk about all the kids that we have down with the Griffins. They're all starting to come up and play fantastic. So it's absolutely great to see. We have a very winnable game tonight against the Sharks. We'll have to wrap up here in a few minutes because I'm actually headed to the game myself. But they may never lose again.
Yeah.
Detroit may never lose again. We have at least, like we said, we had the Wings game tonight. We have the Pistons, I think, tomorrow, unless they have a back-to-back tonight. Just absolutely, like we said, to kind of start the Detroit, sports, the outside of Lions. Just take this in. Enjoy this. Even, like we said, the college sports, Michigan State, enjoy this. We're winning. We're playing really fun. All these teams they're not just winning, they're having fun. Michigan State basketball is having so much fun playing these games. Michigan's playing fantastic with their 2 7-foot point guards, basically. Just really take a moment and enjoy all the success that Detroit's having.
Yeah, and just a quick look around Detroit. You mentioned a couple upcoming games. Thursday the 16th, the Pacers come to town. It's always, an inter-division game. I know divisions don't really matter in the NBA, but I feel like the Pacers and the Pistons, they always play pretty close games. So that's a big one to look at. And then actually also on Thursday, the Wings are on the road. They're playing a very good Florida Panthers team. So I really hope they get the dub. Tonight against the Sharks. You're going to be there, cheer them on, get loud, and then a really big test on Thursday against the Panthers. Let's see if we can, keep this win streak going.
Yep, absolutely. So that is all for our episode. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Obviously, we have this new medium coming to you live wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter, Dutton_Tyler. For myself, Kyle is Kyle_Marino, correct?
Yes, sir. Yep, that's correct. And yeah, honestly, guys, thanks so much for listening. If you've made it this far, you've done it. You've done your part. If we could just ask, 5-star reviews and downloads on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, it helps us more than y'all know. So, thank y'all so much.
And then the last thing we'll say, we obviously have the voicemail set up for the podcast. So make sure you guys call in, leave a voicemail, any sort of topic. It can be sports related, it can be Detroit related, anything really to get us talking, get involved in the conversation. That phone number is 313-306-7939. So give that a call, leave a voicemail. We'll play it live on the podcast, give you guys a chance to get in on the conversation. We'll add that to the end of the podcast here. So that's all we have. We'll talk to you guys next week, hopefully after another Lions win. Let's go out and take it to the commies.
Restore the roar.